First, let me thank you for all the positivity and positive energy we have. And this is what Dubai is all about, right? And thank you for also reminding me that COVID has ended, no masks, handshaking for the first time with so many people. So this is great news. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum said, the way to predict the future is to create it. And this is what we do here in the United Arab Emirates. We are in the business of creating future, creating hope, creating sustainability. And His Highness has said the future of UAE is about sustainability. Although we are one of the largest oil producer, but we are about sustainability. And Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed said by 2070, we will celebrate the last barrel of oil. So this country has been committed to SDGs, sustainability, carbon neutral by 2050. Dubai Can recently, they're all part of a government plans and strategies to make sure that we are on the path of sustainability. We are leader as we are hosting COP28 next year. So the city we need now is a campaign we started with the United Nations, and what we're doing today, VCs for Good, is part of it. And the question, are VCs actually for good? And we talked maybe last time about the history of VCs. In 1300, the first VC by Marco Polo from Venetia to East, and how he connected East and West, and how that helped also in transferring culture, and how that helped to bring the first paper money to Europe. So it was, from the beginning, meant to be for good. And the first traditional, or the first modern VC was after the Second World War, to build countries after the Second World War. So it should be for good. And I'm sure today we will hear more about great stuff that VCs are doing. But we should not forget, when we talk about SDGs, that before COVID, or BC, let's call it, BC, $2.5 trillion was the financing gap, right, per year. And adding to that 1.7 trillion because of COVID, so we're talking about $4.2 trillion on a yearly basis. This is what we need. Our friend Man'am says, if we cut on sugar only, how much sugar we're spending? $20 billion? $50 billion of sugar. So if we all become sustainable, less sugar, we're going to fund maybe education, right, and health. So sustainability is not about environment. Sustainability is about economic, social, environment. It's about doing good. It's about creating competitiveness. And we should look at it from competitiveness point of view. I don't want to take more of your time. All I want to say is that this is not an event, as we said last time. This is a movement, and everyone is part of it. We need to connect the ecosystem actors, the government, the private sector, the VCs, the academia, people. Everyone is part of it. This is our future, and we co-create it together. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy. So in that spirit, we have some of the best people I actually know in this panel that are really doing a lot of work in the region. And the diversity on the way they do the work, I think, makes it great. So what if we just go and get to know them better? Noor, let's start with you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Noor Suede. I work at Global Ventures, which is a VC firm. We invest across Middle East and Africa. We manage about $200 million across 2 funds and some co-invest vehicles for our fantastic investors. We started the firm about 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago. Fund 1 was a $50 million fund. And the thesis was very simple. It was about providing access to entrepreneurs that are on a mission to change the world. And if you go to our website, which is just global.vc, it says we invest in entrepreneurs or founders on a mission to change the world. So my belief is growth is imperative for any company to be successful. The amount of growth obviously depends on the founder. As an investor, we can't manage the actual impact, but we can select founders that are on missions. We have aligned since the beginning of our journey with 5 of the UN SDGs, which we've been measuring now for 4 and a bit years. And funny enough, when COVID happened, we had some of our LPs take a look at our quarterly report and say, since when do you measure this? And I said, since 4 years ago, here's the 2018 report. You just never noticed until COVID happened, and suddenly it's on everyone's mind. But no, we're not jumping on a bandwagon. And so if you take a look at our fintech investments, they've enabled 24 million people to have access to financial services. If you take a look at our digital health investment, they've enabled 4.5 million people In education, which we started investing in more recently, we're at 450,000 children. And then we take a look at gender equality. So 34% of our founders are female. And then you take a look at job growth, which for me is imperative in this part of the world because you have 40% unemployment in your youth. So without moving the needle on that, it's really hard to create economic opportunity. So our portfolio has created 6,200 jobs. So I wouldn't say that in any way, shape, or form we're responsible for that, and we will not take credit for it as an investor. But I will give the team, our team, the credit of finding founders who care enough about this, that this is also on their mind alongside financial returns. And to do all of that while performing incredibly well from a financial perspective for our LPs and giving them some money back on some exits and operating as a VC, right, is really great because you can change a dialogue from do well or do good to do well and do good. So that's our mindset.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sharif El-Badawi. I also am in VC on the tech side, and we invest in right now I'm working for a fund here in Dubai called the Dubai Future District Fund. We invest in VC funds, and then we invest in tech startups directly. I've been investing probably for about 7 years, and before that was a tech entrepreneur and a tech executive at Google. The way I see it, very much like Noor said, is what we're doing is enabling those people who are on a mission to do good, and the enablers of the enablers. So it's just a cascading effect. And I think a lot of the discussion today, I hope, is about how we really have to start at the very top. And like we're seeing these days with ESGs, at least in the US, some of the LPs who invest in venture capital funds are starting to recognize and pay attention to ESGs as part of the fund thesis that they invest in, and requiring the VCs that they invest in to also report on their activities therein. But to back up, like I got into VC, and we'll talk about this unlearning thing, but I got into VC in the first place because we came out to the region and started meeting entrepreneurs who were trying to build companies to change their own surroundings and their environment, which I felt like was the most efficient way to actually change socioeconomic status of a people. And from that, they didn't have the funding that they needed. And I think from there, it just became very clear to me that venture capital is one of the most effective and efficient ways to make change. And it just has to be done right. So with any industry, there can be good players and there could be bad players. We have to find the right founders to invest in. The right VCs have to be in it for the right reasons.
My name is Joost Smulders. I'm with Dubai Green Fund, which is a Dubai government initiative that was created as part of the Dubai Clean Energy 2050 strategy for Dubai, which since last October is now aiming for 100% clean energy and net zero by 2050. And we focus mainly on infrastructure investments in renewables, and therefore from the ESG spectrum, the E, environmental, that is our clear priority. And we always want a very direct, either clean energy generation or energy avoidance, so energy savings from our projects.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lola Fernandez. I work at VentureSouk. We are a regional venture capital firm investing regionally and globally. We have two funds. The first one is a fintech fund, and the second one is what we call Conscious Collective. That's the fund I work under. We choose to invest in early-stage technology companies that are harnessing the power of technology to hopefully do good. And we do that by choosing to focus on specific verticals such as financial inclusion, climate tech, and food and agriculture. We launched this a couple of years back, and we took a step beyond the traditional financial product, and we also created an education product. We realized that in talking to many LPs, co-investors, and family offices, a lot of people in the region wanted to learn what exactly do impact investors do. So we partnered together with StartAD, which is the accelerator of NYU Abu Dhabi, and KAUST, one of the leading universities in Saudi Arabia, to build a 2-month fellowship for people like you, for GP managers, for corporate leaders and government entities to craft, to first understand what impact investing means, but then craft their own theory of change and understand what the path forward is to do good and do well, to quote Noor.
Wonderful.
Good morning. My name is Faris. I run an ESG-focused venture builder in Dubai. We started 2 years ago with the hope to start tackling climate challenges and social challenges in our region and beyond. Our focus is purely on starting with the right hypothesis. So our ideation strategy starts with blending in different ESG factors according to several global impact frameworks, the likes of GRI and SASP and IMP. And this is how we build these frameworks at ideation. We believe that early stage is extremely important. Our role is to de-risk early stage for responsible investors because we operate and we invest in pre-seed tickets and seed tickets. Our portfolio ranges from different environmental-focused portfolio startups to several social and community-related portfolio startups. So starting from slowing down the rate of deforestation globally to taking out plastic from CPG and FMCG industries to launching direct-to-consumer startups all the way to carbon capture and methane capture. This is what we are extremely serious about, and we're trying to really spread knowledge and awareness about and invite the public sector and the private sector to act responsibly and act now. We have very optimistic milestones coming up, especially that the UAE will be hosting COP28 next year. We believe that it's a shared responsibility between entrepreneurs, investors, public sector and private sector to start innovating digitally and in infrastructure on several solutions that will tackle these challenges very soon. Thank you very much.
What is the one thing you definitely think that everybody here should unlearn to learn the new way of doing good?
I think it's the fool's choice, right? And I think life is always full of the fool's choice, which is I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place and I have to pick one, right? And I think the same comes to capital allocation. It's here's where I make good IRRs, and then here's where I do my philanthropy. And I think to unlearn that is incredibly important. So to unlearn that it's one or the other, to create an option that actually suits the world better and suits you better is hard work, but that is what must be done. And for me, that came, personally at 2 points in my life. One was the global financial crisis. So I had the privilege of working with my father for many years. And in 2005, when I joined the family business, we had 60 million revenue in 6 countries, 1,000 people. By 2008, we had 600 million revenue, 22 countries, 9,500 people. I was very lucky. We IPO'd the business in April 2008. So for those of you that remember 2008, that was about a month and 10 days before, the financial crisis. And I'm the daughter of an entrepreneur, right? So my father was an entrepreneur before me, started several businesses until one became very successful. And when the global financial crisis happened, and I said, we have to streamline, look at the crisis, he just came and said, that's fine, you just can't fire people. So I'm like, well, no, but we run a company that's public in London. We have Fidelity, Morgan Stanley. We have them. We have to downsize. He's like, yeah, you have to remember that every job affects 10 people in this part of the world, at least. Our definition of family is different, and we have 40% unemployment in the youth. And not everybody's privileged to have a tertiary education or a job. So even if they are, they probably can't find a job. He's like, so you can't fire people. So we ended up laying off 400 people out of 9,500 in a contracting company during the world's biggest financial crisis. But it was a learning for me that it's not about the money. He's like, find a way to make it work. Don't take the fool's choice. Several years later, at the same time, I was building my own company, which was a very little yoga studio. It was an accident. It wasn't supposed to be a company. It was supposed to be a project. But we ended up with 72 teachers, 6,000 students a month, and I couldn't find any money, no capital in the market. And I realized that building 0 to 1 was much harder than running a $1 billion company in many ways. And so as a result, I just wanted to start helping investors, helping founders, and started angel investing. And again, they would grow. They would need more money. I'm not that scalable. I would send them abroad to raise money. And they would leave and never come back. And I'm like, well, that's also not helpful. And then I would take a look at these two problems that I had been very close to. And one day I read this statistic in the US that VC-backed companies create 2.8 times as many jobs as non-VC-backed companies. And I was like, well, here are my data points. We have high unemployment and we have no VC in the region, or very little VC. So if you want to fix the unemployment problem, the best and fastest way to do that, especially with our demographic where everyone wants to be in tech, is fix the access to capital for founders problem. Get into VC to fix the unemployment problem. And in the meantime, if you can align yourself with some other SDGs or missions, you can fix so many other problems along the way.
Brilliant.
You know, we're chasing, you know, as you would. You work at a company, you chase sort of the career track. And I had a lot of paternity leave, so I had a chance to travel to the region here to mentor. They said, hey, you want to go on a mentorship roadshow? And it was in those moments I was meeting entrepreneurs on the ground in Amman, Beirut, Cairo, Dubai. And this could apply anywhere in the world, but it was the same thing happening. And those founders would say, you know, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. And it was very clear to me, yes, it's a business, but if they succeed at this, it's much more than just a business. Not just because of job creation, but because it gives people their own wherewithal to control their destiny. And right after the Arab Spring, that was a very big, you know, thing. Are we waiting for the government to solve the problems, or are we waiting for the people to solve their own problems? And it was clear to me that it's going to be a bottoms-up solution. And entrepreneurship, using the data points Noor said, plus, you know, Hillary Clinton around that time was saying 90% of net new jobs in the U.S. were created by SMEs and startups. And I think 85% of all R&D in the U.S. for the last 50 years was created by venture-backed startups, and so on. And the list keeps going. And you look at all the public stock, all the public companies on the stock market were replaced from fossil fuel companies to tech companies over the last 15, 20 years. And the numbers the statistics just keep going on. So I had this conviction that, you know, venture capital and entrepreneurship or backing startups was the most effective way to make change in the world. Now, it can be done good, and it can also be done not so good, just like in any other industry. So I don't think it's about that. But the one very big aha moment is I joined a nonprofit called Tech Wadi. And I started meeting UNICEF and World Bank and all these other, you know, they're like, oh, we have this issue happening in Morocco. We have this other issue here. We have anti-terrorism stuff happening over there. It was all good words. And there was like refugees coming from this country to that country. Like, man, we got to solve these things. So I jumped into this whole NGO nonprofit world as a Google executive. So it's not my world, but I thought I was learning about something that was way better than what we were doing at Google as just regular tech people. It turns out that wasn't true at all. A lot of the wrongdoing turned out to be under the guise of doing good. And sometimes you can go about your life not ever saying you're doing good, but you actually are doing better than that. And so to me, that was a big unlearning. And so people would harp on me and say, well, why are you doing venture capital? Why don't you do impact investing? And so it was hard to unlearn that or learn that. I don't know which direction you want us to go in, but that's what I was learning was that, gosh, you know, I think we're actually doing better just investing in solid businesses, and those solid businesses inevitably have a double bottom line. Versus, you know, somebody says, I want to create this magazine. It's a really social good magazine. How come you're not supporting it? You're mean, you know, you're not supporting it. But there's no business there, so they're never going to impact 1 billion people. So then it's not really going to have the impact that they expect it to have. And I'll just do one last unlearning. I applied while I was in the ads team at Google, because ads feels really evil for some reason, but to google.org, which is a very, you know, non-evil, you know, organization. And I applied, and I interviewed, and I said, I'm sorry, I don't come from that world. You know, you're going to see me as a really weak candidate. And they said, actually, we do not hire people who walk in the door and say, I like to do good, you know, just because I'm passionate about doing good. They said, you'll never get anything done. We're looking for cutthroat, super smart, operations, successful people who are going to come in and change the world, because that's where the real impact is going to come from. So that's my last lesson.
Great stories, thanks. Anyone else?
So maybe also a brief one. So there is a general misconception in the market that investing in green is somehow less profitable or not profitable at all. And maybe that was true 20 years ago or 30 years ago, where you couldn't do a solar project without a government subsidy. But actually today that's not the case. And in fact, electricity generation from solar is now, in most places in the world, the cheapest form of power. So that is quite a game changer. That's also one of the goals of Dubai Green Fund, is actually to show to the market that you can invest sustainable green impact, but at the same time with a profit. And that's another misconception. Some people think that someone like Dubai Green Fund is a subsidy investor. But that's not. We are an infrastructure investor. We're looking for infrastructure returns, and we are able to achieve that by investing purely in green projects. And that's very important to realize. And the same, for example, for energy efficiency projects. The payback periods on energy efficiency projects is about 4-5 years, depending on the technology. So they're actually highly profitable projects for an investor, but also for any business owner that has a building or that is paying a utility bill, which is almost everyone. You can actually achieve very significant savings in your monthly bills, and therefore be a greener business, and at the same time actually profit financially, which unfortunately is still one of the main drivers of many decisions, is ultimately also their financial benefits. But fortunately, that financial benefit and the green objectives, they are actually aligned. So there is really no excuse not to invest in that.
You guys? We are very linear. You see, there's no way. We always go linear.
I'm going to play the card of I'm built different, because I don't have the decades of careers that you guys have. I basically have been in the world for a couple of decades, and it's been a bit tough. No, but seriously, I think that my generation, I didn't have to unlearn, because this is my first job, so I'm here to learn. But really, what I really had to realize is that me and the rest of my next gen consumers, employees, employers, VC fund managers, we're here to walk the talk. We've spent 20, 30 years with promises being thrown at us of like, yes, the air pollution will be better, the financial crisis will, pass, and everything will be better. And we haven't seen anything yet. So for me, it was more like, okay, this hasn't happened, but it can happen. So let's make it happen.
Interesting.
So before we started the Hatch and Boost a couple of years ago, I've been a corporate guy for 13, 15 years. So I was fortunate enough to consider Aramex my career development platform. And what I had to unlearn when I decided to venture into startups is to stop the obsession with financial returns and profits, and look at it with an equal way and an even way when you consider financial returns and impact returns equally. So looking at it from the same lens and the same angle, this is what I've personally struggled for a couple of months, to stop this obsession and unlearn this obsession and learn a new obsession on how to equalize financial returns versus impact. And as you said, and as everybody on the panel said, we're seeing a lot of trends picking up momentum globally, and we've seen a lot of traction towards conscious consumerism. So new gen, they wouldn't want to buy packaged goods with plastic. They're tired of seeing the same whites and blues and greens on the shelves. They're procuring goods from different platforms and different locations. So the journey starts with how do we really tackle these issues for the climate and for the society, and how do we build for good and invest responsibly for good as well.
what we advocate at SAS is to embed sustainability in the core business. It's not just I say, in my values, I'm good. In my mission, I'm good. No, in my core business, I'm good. So how do you guys evaluate that? How do you guys make sure the ventures you invest and you relate to, they have in their core business incorporated those important concepts that go beyond the nice concepts of sustainable goals? Anybody wants to start? I'm not looking.
I mean, I'll start so we can go down the line normally.
You see,
I'm not
it's a
confuse
trend.
people. I'm not, just to avoid confusion. So I have many thoughts about this. So I might go on for a little bit longer than I'd like, but
Feel free.
I have many thoughts. The first is, frankly, it really doesn't matter. Right? So to be controversial, and I'll get to what we actually do about it. But my gut and my core says, when we have 0.2 doctors per 1,000 in sub-Saharan Africa, as opposed to 4.5 in Europe, we're solving a little bit of a different problem, right? So it's really nice to focus on the environment and scope 3 and think about what are these different scopes. And it's really idealistic for us to become an Article 9 fund, and therefore we can attract even more capital from institutions to give to founders to build their businesses. But at the end of the day, if you're solving for when a child is sick, the nearest doctor is 7 hours away, do I really care if it's scope 3 or scope 2 or scope 1, right? If you're solving for 150 million out-of-school children in the Middle East and Africa, that's 50% of the world's out of school, un-COVID related. Do I care if it's scope 3 or scope 2 or scope 1, right? So when we take a look at the quantum and the size and the depth of the problems we're solving for on basic health needs, basic education, even financial inclusion, right? I think it's really nice that the Europeans and the Americans can focus on the environment. That's kind of like my frank kind of humanitarian thoughts, right? Because over here, we don't have access to clean water, right? In most of this part of the world. That's part one. Part two is, of course it matters. Of course it's great to be scope 3. Of course if you're designing something from scratch, given where technology is today, why not incorporate it? If you're a founder that even knows that this is a thing, and you're sitting in Lagos trying to figure out mobility or the future of work for your population, and you know about scope 3, sure, incorporate scope 3. Why not? It's doable, right? By the time we come along as VC investors, it's a little bit too late. No one's going to rebuild their entire tech stack to incorporate this, and they are solving a real problem, and they have fixed financial inclusion for God knows how many million people, and that's great. Do I really care then as an investor, who I am still as an investor trying to prove to the world that an asset class that does well and does good exists? And this is a company that is solving financial inclusion, that is creating my financial returns, but oops, doesn't meet scope 3. Do I care? Right. So this is kind of where you get to, you're doing everything right as the founder, and then as the investor, you're creating the IRRs on the venture side, creating more impact than half the impact world claims they create. So does scope 3 matter? Right. And then you get to a point where there's incredible technologies that we've invested in. So we invested in a company called Red Sea Farms, which is based out of Saudi Arabia. It came out of King Abdullah University, out of KAUST. And an Australian and a Brit who built a technology that's patented that reduces the amount of energy and water required for vertical farming by 95%. And the secret is that they filter the water, the seawater, using cacti. Right? But it's globally patented. And if you buy tomatoes at Carrefour, you're buying tomatoes that have used their infrastructure and their filtering techniques to filter this water, and they are changing the world on a scope 1, 2, 3, and 4, and all of the levels that you want. And it's incredible, and we've invested in this company, and we're incredibly happy, and it changes the world and improves the environment, and you've checked all your boxes. So I literally have 3 minds about this, right? Which is why I went on for a little longer than a panelist should, but this is where we land. So to the extent that something like Red Sea Farms exists, happy to invest, happy to back it, let's go, let's represent the region, let's build these green funds, let's do what we need to do for the region. But to the extent that we see 400 companies a month. So to the extent that there's 399 other founders solving real world problems that are not scope 3, let's focus on the real world problems.
Any more visions on that? That was a hard one after, her comment, huh?
Sorry.
It's a very nice balancing to it.
I'll do a quick one. So I think back to Noor and your hypothesis around the different scopes and levels. So I think we have a massive, humongous funnel of issues that need to be solved. Yeah. So whether it is climate related or community related, whether it is solving jobs or catering for a better life, or whether it is helping the environment and the planet, the funnel is massive, and I think everybody should act now about it. So we need to start solving issues that are real problems. So back to vertical farming, and we have a portfolio startup in vertical farming, but it is not a human-grade food, it is animal-grade food. So we're looking at the food that we're eating, and how do we make it greener? How do we make it healthier for the animals, and then for human and for the environment? And how do we actually do something? If we are able to slow down the rate of deforestation by 0.001, this is a win, yeah? Because this region imports heavily. This region depends heavily on imports. This region imports animal fodder. Almost 90% or 95% of the region demands are imported from Australia and the US and South Africa. So if we start with looking at this at scale, what are we doing? We're stopping a cross-border trade line. We're stopping ocean freight by producing locally. We're also stopping the rate of deforestation of the Amazon forest, because they've been cut down to plant cornfields and hay for, and we're helping also with water resources. So this region has no water resources, and it shouldn't be depleted on growing these grades of food. So if we look with this wide angle at different climate challenges and different social challenges, then we just need to pick our battles as entrepreneurs and startups and as VCs, and start telling these great narratives and great stories to whoever is engaged and whoever is excited about solving real problems. And when we blend in digital innovation, then you have this perfect intersection between tech and impact. And this is something that has been picking up recently as we emerged out of COVID and the lockdown. We discovered that this lockdown of 30 or 60 days has opened the eye and the perspective of so many companies within the private sector and public sector towards starting solving these issues now and acting now and solving them at scale and deploying capital in a very responsible way. Yeah.
I have two thoughts here. The first one is that with regards to all scopes, 1, 2, 3, no one's asking startups to be perfect from day one. If anything, we're investing to reap the benefits of them getting better. But I actually believe that startups should be aware of all the scope 1, 2, 3, all their emissions, all their externalities, especially in emerging markets. And that is because emerging markets now have the opportunity to leapfrog. No one is telling them, oh, do the same, spend the next 20 years doing what the US and Europe did. Actually, no. You have the technology, you have the talent, and you have the capital now to leapfrog and be just a better type of company and serve your customers much better. For us, one of the best case studies that we found in our portfolio is a company called Betterfly out of Chile. Out of all places that for me it was impressive coming from Latin America. They just became a unicorn within a year, and they were a B Corp. They chose from the very beginning of inception of the company to not only have a core business model that is impactful, and that is by giving insurance to uninsured people, and by tracking their improvements in daily habits through your Apple Watch, through your phone, through the minutes of meditation that you do, expanding their insurance coverage. So that's their business model. That's impactful at its core, but they went one step ahead, and no one asked them to. That was a conscious decision that the founder made. that said, we're going to become a B Corp. And that means that we're going to be accountable to the highest standards the industry has seen, to our environmental externalities, to our social duties with our community, and to our governance transparency. You can see it on our website. Here it is. We not only have more over billions on insurance coverage that we have given and that our members have earned with their habits that are improved, but on top of that, we are offsetting our emissions, giving out donations because we understand the duty that we have to our communities. And in 1 year, they grew 20x, and they just recently raised their unicorn round. So the opportunity is there, and it's a conscious choice.
Yeah, that's a great example.
I would say not many companies, if any, are truly net zero and green at the moment. So when we look at projects or investments, we look at the incremental benefit. So if a project can achieve X% material percentage of savings in their energy consumption, then that's a win. And then that's a project that we can invest in. It doesn't mean the actual business that owns this project has to be 100% green, but they are working towards the cause. And obviously there's a lot of work to be done towards achieving net zero in 2050. So we have to take small steps and manageable steps that you can evaluate independently. And that's how you make a small impact one step at a time. And of course, we encourage the companies to look at that broader, all the levels of their emissions and evaluate that and work on that. But for our investment decision, we look at the specific project and whether that project has a positive impact or not. And I think that's important, so we can all make small steps towards the ultimate goal, because you can't get there in one step.
I mean, I had a question. It touches on sort of what Noor was saying, and also the question of leapfrogging. So it's great if you can leapfrog, that's fantastic. But the reality is a lot of businesses won't be able to. And does the panel think there's really a kind of penalty for the West to pay? It's used its natural resources, it's caused emissions. Africa is sitting on amazing natural resources that the West is saying, sorry, you can't use. And actually, therefore, the West should be expected to have a higher responsibility when it comes to emission controls, and that it's reasonable to say, actually, investing in Africa, you can take a more relaxed approach, because actually that's kind of part of the penalty that the West is paying for having already used its resources and made emissions during that process, I guess.
And the question?
Well, is that a reasonable approach to take? Is it a reasonable approach to say, actually, well, look, the West has already used those natural resources?
That was my comment. So
that was, you see, it's all connected. Yeah. Go ahead, man.
You saw that coming, I guess. But you're absolutely, I mean, that was my comment too. I think the largest, oldest companies and countries who are responsible for getting us to where we are today should bear the biggest burden. I really don't think we should be focusing on putting pressure on the startups because really, first of all, they're not creating a lot of, let's say, pollution or whatever it is, injustice yet. And they're not going to, because they're the younger generation anyway. So I think that leapfrogging will happen. It's already happening, in the startups we see they're using technology anyway, most of them. So they're already way more efficient than incumbent companies. And why not tax the largest companies and countries who have caused this to happen in the first place? And maybe get off the reliance on these natural resources.
In the VC world, you are betting on an exit that they will come to that scale and they will play by those rules eventually, right? If the environment is changing in the first place for them to get to that level, perhaps from inception, like just she says, it's good business also to have that incorporated, because eventually they will face investors that are regulated, fully regulated on that regards. There is one specific regulation that we see growing a lot, which is the TCFD, which is not a regulation, it's more a framework. TCFD is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. SEC probably will rely on that to make decisions. In Europe, we see the SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. And all of that is putting pressure on investors that maybe not at a VC stage, but that will, bring businesses in that, help them to comply, because it becomes a compliance issue. So I fully agree, Noor, with what you said. I mean, I'm from Latin America, and for us, sustainability is a social problem, right? I'm Brazilian in the first place, so we see that, and most of our customers in the region, they are also concerned about that. But the crises we see ahead of us, they come from the emissions, right? So if we don't stick to the global warming levels that are defined by Paris Agreement, by science-based reports, it's a catastrophe ahead of us, right? And that eventually will affect everybody anyway. You can have the doctors there, but then if there is multiple catastrophic events that will happen, even if the doctors are there will be, a problem, it's a more generic problem, more than the pandemic we just saw, right? So what is the magic formula that we can create right here and right now from the region that already, prepare for that environment? And if this is new, I mean, maybe all that we are speaking right now is new because, SEC just announced, SFDR just came into place last year or maybe even this year. So all of that regulation at that layer is brand new. So is it time for refresh and start bringing in all components, not only one, not only another one, but all components as part of the evaluation process? Can we do something different from today onwards, not thinking of the past?
I'll share our experience as a fund, and then I'll give you an example of an entrepreneur. So our experience as a fund is the following. We had several European investors that wanted to invest in our fund, but it's not an Article 9 fund, and they have to be Article 9. We would qualify more for Article 7. We're working towards Article 9, right? But as a result, they didn't invest, right? So everything else matched, but they couldn't do it because of their governance and all these new rules. So I think that these new rules, especially in the short term, will simply start to exclude the European and American investors that are the capital allocators that have to abide by these rules and can only invest in funds that have these rules from emerging market investment. That is what we have seen in our second fund, and unless we can get to that level of compliance, we can no longer take capital from certain institutions. It's really ridiculous, in my humble opinion. Why is it ridiculous? Because in this fund that they could not invest in, we have an entrepreneur who's sitting in Nigeria, 2 entrepreneurs, MIT alums. They built a company called Max. Max was doing daily loans so that people can get that loan in the morning, borrow from that money a tuk-tuk or a motorbike, be a gig economy worker, so think about future of work and income opportunity, and then at the end of the day, return the loan with a fee and keep the difference, right? So you're creating jobs. This was Max when we invested a year ago. Max has now just built a solar-paneled 3-wheeler that is cheaper to borrow if you're going to take the solar panel 3-wheeler that they're manufacturing, right? And so you take a look at the environmental impact. So now you've impacted future of work, so access to opportunity, mobility for everybody else, and they're going pure green. In 2 years, every time you borrow on Max, you have to borrow to take one of these solar-powered EVs, if you want, but it's not an EV because it's not electric. That's better than anything that exists in Europe. But sorry, we're not an Article 9 fund. So you take a look, it's like if you really want to change the world on so many different metrics and the environment, these are the companies you should be backing. But we cannot get to those standards in emerging markets so quickly, even as a best practice governance in the fund that we try to be, because they've had 7 or 8 years of prep. But these founders need this money to change the world. So that's the disconnect. And so I think that these are really nice rules to have, and they're very idealistic and they're great. But if that means that the money's going to stop trickling to emerging markets, then you're going to stop having as many of these founders like Max.
Everyone is trying to go goods, and then if we speak a global a call or a global message, we're all trying to leap towards the SDGs and the Agenda of 2030 with the objective of not leaving anyone left behind. That's a very noble call, let's say. Historically, we've always thought that we can only achieve that by philanthropy and CSR and donations and all these. Backed up with a calculation, we've tried to estimate the global financials assets that are existing when we do philanthropy and donations. And it's all around $50 billion, where we need $4.2 trillion to achieve the SDGs in a yearly base in the developing world alone. Now, a simple calculation, the global financial assets that are existing around the world are more than $370 trillion, all we need to achieve the SDGs is 1.1% of that. Just 1.1% is to save this world and save this planet. And we understood that we can only achieve that through accelerating impact investment, because the SDGs are $12 trillion of business assets. My question to you is why we are not capable to allocate 1.1% of the global financial assets in order to save this world through accelerating impact investing.
Sounds like a new event, just to cover that. Go ahead, guys.
I actually think we are capable of doing that very easily, but it's these measures that we're taking. If we're looking up, let's say, it is not hard to... The trend that started, let's say, the last few years in ESG certainly hit VC, even though I don't think we're the biggest target that it can impact, because that 1% is not going to come from making investors invest in new startups, which are millennial founders. That's not where the damage is happening as much as the 99% of the damage, which has already happened from incumbents and governments. So if they were to just shave off a little bit of the damage, maybe we'll hit the 1% just from that. And then there's the whole trend of like, you become a billionaire doing a hedge fund, mining oil, and then you write a book about impact. I think that's pretty funny. But the serious note of that is, okay, well, why did it take you 40 years of causing damage to realize you needed to cause good? The younger generation's not thinking like that. So can we get to the 1%? Absolutely. I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen fast, just like every innovation happens faster and faster throughout time. And the dinosaurs are going to eventually die out, and the new companies are going to find better ways to do the microloans on a daily basis, to feed people, to get healthcare across countries. Like, we're finding better ways to do those things. Of course, those are going to get the new contracts, the new customers, the new hires. And talent, I mean, right now, yes, there's a talent crunch here, but we're looking, that's a very short-term look. They say 75% of all jobs are going to be wiped out. You're not going to need them anymore in some horizon. We look at it as a 2050 economies horizon. World population is going to double. Number one driver of that, or driver of E7 replacing G7, is the population growth. Then massive migrations are going to happen in the next 30 years. Food security is going to be massive problem. So all of these things are going to, I think by default, allow the old to wane, and only the new is going to survive. So for me, that's sort of the optimistic look at it. You don't actually have to do very much for all of this to fix itself.
Investors are by definition risk averse. And it's only now that it's been 10 years since we coined impact investing as a term. So effectively, we've had the same vintages for funds of impact investing and AI, but there was no data. So I think now when ESG is picking up, obviously it's because it's in front of our faces, but it's also because every day centers from NYU, from Harvard, from Columbia are saying, guys, in the long term, this actually pays off. So I think now it's the moment where people are going to dedicate more money to that.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I think from my perspective, and we are obviously on the less risk appetite part of the spectrum. We like to invest in projects and infrastructure that have visible cash flow. But there are, and I'm speaking for the local environment, there are actually too few of these projects for us to invest in. So our challenge is not actually capital. We have plenty of capital, but we have too few opportunities. So we are very keen for everyone to basically come up with these projects and to work on these initiatives so that we can actually deploy the funding. So it comes from both sides. And obviously globally, there's been a huge attention in the last couple of years. So I think the capital will eventually be there, but we need the projects. And obviously part of that starts with the VC at the very early stage. So we're really hoping that all these VC companies are going to be successful and they reach a stage where they have bigger projects where investors like us can invest in. So I think, we have to work together to then achieve that.
I guess your question was extremely on point. You got the attention of the whole panel. So I think we're getting there. If you compare 22 with 2010 or 2012, then you can see the difference. So it's not that it is a slow movement. It is a very rapid movement that is happening, and it's just about it's just about the corner that great things are going to happen, and we're going to see, because of the data points, we're going to see the impact. And the minute this impact is measured properly and reported properly, and being made public, then I think the whole financial system will be confident enough to change the whole asset class, whether it is public market, capital markets, or liquid assets around ESG. We've seen ESG indices like for the past couple of years, and now we can hear individuals talking about, you know what, I've invested in an ETF, a carbon-focused ETF, and I've made more returns than what I've put in Bitcoin. You know, these discussions have recently started, and this is part of the movement. So
let's pitch to them what you're looking for. You know, like give them some ideas.
A quick snapshot of what we're doing at the Dubai Future District Fund. We struggled a lot with trying to develop a strategy that was very impact focused, but very mindful that it needed to be a performance-based fund as well, because that way we can align incentives across the entire cycle. We have two pillars. One is future of finance, and that is the 15 to 20 fintechs, subsectors, the horizontal themes of financial inclusion and embedded finance. And it includes reg tech, legal tech, and all this compliance, and Web3, and you know the finance side of Web3. The other pillar is what we call future economies. And this is less about the underlying sectors that make up that pillar, more about how we see the technology shifts between now and 2050 economies. So if you read the 115 or so 2050 economy reports out there, they all point in a certain direction that these changes are going to happen in the world. Then we look at what are the drivers of those changes. Then we look at, okay, as a VC, we think we future invest as VCs, but we're really investing in just right on the horizon. You can't really invest 20 to 30 years out. Although as a government fund, we do hope one day, once we fund enough VCs to do the generic, regular stuff that you see every day, that we will be able to free up our capital to invest in the gaps. And the gaps to us are frontier tech, deep tech, things that the private VCs who have a 10-year life of their fund don't have the time frame to do. We're an evergreen fund, so our return horizon's forever. So that's how we spent almost a year designing this strategy so that every incentive matches and correlates and sort of gives the effect that you'll get an impact today for what people are doing, let's say food delivery or doctor booking app. Or you might say, well, that's not really impactful. Well, it does solve problems today and it's creating jobs today, and that's a 5 to 7 year return horizon. Then we look at, okay, a 10 to 15 year return horizon, which you don't want to be investing too early, you'll miss the window. So we're looking at these 2 or 3 cycles of returns, and as a government fund, we can look that far while supporting the investors who are investing today. So that's the overall pitch. That means that some, on the future economies side, for some health tech companies could fit our future economies thesis, but some other health tech might not, and ed tech and logistics, supply chains, food security. We do use the SDGs. We use a lot of what we see as sort of the existential issues of the world that he was talking about as our sort of rudder to guide us on whether this is future economies or not. And the team debates this vigorously. We, for 4 months, is still not completely documented future economies because it is nuanced, right? We debate a lot of times like, okay, healthcare, that sounds impactful, but is it future economies? Is it what we're thinking of when we say, like, is it going to solve 1 billion people's problems? Is it going to address some of the let's say, what's the counter to impact? So some of the bad things that are happening in the world, right? And that's something we're very excited about because both pillars, even future finance, which sounds very capitalistic, we don't approach it from that way. It's a lot of it is how can we get more efficient on capital, get access to more people, and the inclusion part of it. So those are the things that we're focused on as a fund. Thanks.
So just also to link in with some of the earlier questions about triage, about energy efficiency, I would recommend every business. It doesn't, like startups, ventures, bigger corporations, look at the low-hanging fruits. There's a lot you can actually do, and especially on the energy efficiency front here in the region, buildings, especially if they're a little bit older, they're not the most energy efficient buildings in the world. Very often when buildings are constructed in the first place, you get 3 quotes, you take the lowest one, you build it. So the construction cost is low, but we forget to look at the total cost of ownership and how much energy is it actually going to take to operate, cool this building going forward. And there's a lot of savings that can be achieved there. And there are, as the gentleman said, there are ESCO energy service companies in the market that work with investors like us, where the investor can effectively pay 100% of the capex to improve the energy efficiency of the building, and the repayment comes from the savings. And obviously, in the beginning, a bigger percentage of the savings, let's say 80%, goes to the investor to recover the investment, but the building owner or operator, they have an immediate benefit from day one of benefiting from the services. And then once the investor is paid, you have the full benefits basically forever going forward. So it's a zero cost offering, but there are actually surprisingly few building owners who actually go for this option, because even though it's free, they think it's too good to be true or it's too much hassle. But it's really a win-win and a no-brainer. So I would recommend everyone to look into that for your own business and try to make small improvements to ultimately contribute to the bigger goal.
Thank you.
I have 2 pitches. But before that, on the topic of SDGs, for any founders in the room, please check Iris Plus. It's a little bit more comprehensive than the SDGs and sometimes solves certain offsets and decisions to make. My pitch, if you're a founder working on a climate tech, food tech, supply, financial inclusion solution, please come talk to me. We will be looking to invest for the upcoming 2 years in early stage technology companies globally. If you want to switch to a startup, also come talk to me and align your work with your values. And then the second pitch that I had was for any executive that would like to learn more about how to start an impact investing thesis. We run our Conscious Investor Fellowship. It's free. We run it it runs from September to November. And it's 25 fellows. Applications are going to open in the next month or so. So please join the movement.
Thank you.
So actually, I have also 2 pitches. So I spend most of my time trying to explain the vision of super early stage ESG venture building. Yeah. So 2 pitches. The first one for entrepreneurs. We're actively looking for super responsible, fearless, and relentless talent to build with us. Yeah. So we love to build alongside entrepreneurs who are responsible, who are aware and conscious about the mission of every portfolio startup that graduates from Hatch & Boost. So this is the first pitch. The second pitch is basically where capital networks are consolidated, whether in this country, in this region. We would like to together start these conversations and look at impact returns with the same and even and equal importance of financial returns. And this region is yet to become a leader in impact investing. We've seen a lot of traction, a lot of I would say focused initiatives from the government to push this agenda, but we need to rally all of us, public and private sector, together to impact the country, the region, and the globe.